Hi friends, I'm Chelsea Grayson coming to you once again from the Office of the CEO. This is my show where I can help you be more successful in your current career, and I can also help you successfully transition to a new career. Today is another episode in my ongoing series about transferable skills. So these are the skills that I suggest that you develop and polish over the course of your career so that to the extent that you decide to transfer careers, whether that's to a new industry, to a new position, or even if you're transferring from staff up to the managerial level in your company, you'll have the skills that will make you an attractive candidate and that will also make you successful starting from day one. So today's going to be a relatively short episode. I wanted to give you some quick tips about how to develop and polish some of the technical or substantive skills that we talked about on the last episode. So if you recall, and I'll give you a little brush up here, we talked about the idea that everyone should have good financial acumen. You should understand what makes up a set of financial statements, and you should also understand how to put together a budget, how to toggle your budget based on what's going on through the course of the period that you were applying that budget, and then how to develop a budget for the next period based on lessons learned. So that's financial acumen. We talked about how to get experience in making high stakes presentations to high stakes audiences. So not just a touch base with your boss, right? It's an actual formal presentation to maybe the board of directors or the C-suite or a panel of folks. We talked about just developing public skills generally. We talked about gaining basic fundamental tech or IT skills, since most companies these days are going through some sort of a digital transformation, and it will never do for you to say, oh, that's not in my wheelhouse, or I'm not a tech person, that's not what I do. Only those folks who have some sort of basic tech understanding and experience are the folks that are going to advance, because people will understand that yes, that's not their main job, but at least they have a fundamental understanding of technology. How to hire and fire people. Can't stress how important this is. It's incredibly awkward, it's difficult, it's emotional, but you have to know how not just to attract talent and to promote and keep talent once you invested in them, but also how to assess when it's time to let talent go, and then how to actually go through the procedure of doing that. Everyone should know how to negotiate a contract. Again, that's going to be a whole series of episodes that we'll do later on down, but that is, what are the different components of a contract? How do you read the boilerplate section of a contract, for example? How do you figure out exactly where the rubber meets the road, where you figure out what the obligations are, where the liabilities are, what happens if something goes wrong? All of those sorts of things are incredibly important to understand. And then any substantive skills, right? Understanding supply chain, understanding how a retail structure works, understanding marketing, both from a brand to performance marketing perspective, and also understanding restructuring. In other words, what to do when you're in a distressed entity, how to restructure the entity so it can move on successfully. So those are some examples of some of the substantive skills we talked about last time. And so what's the way that you can develop these substantive skills? I mean, obviously, if you're lucky, you work at an organization, or you work in an industry where you can gain some of these skills on the job. Even if it's not a part of your daily gig, there might be someone on the job that you can shadow, or that you can, talk to in the margins, during some time off or during breaks, in between calls on the weekends, where you can gain some sort of substantive understanding of what it is that they do. And a lot of people are willing to mentor you. So this is sort of an informal mentor situation or a shadow situation. That's clearly one way to do it, but most people aren't lucky enough to have the sorts of skills on perfect display like that, or perfectly available to them on their job. If you were doing those things every single day on your job, then we wouldn't be having this conversation, right? So you've obviously got to go outside of your job, potentially outside the four walls of your organization, to develop some of these skills. And this is going to sound incredibly basic, but this is really the best, most effective and productive way to do it. Get online. There's a million courses out there that you could take, even in these times when we can't actually go physically to a seminar or to some sort of set of lessons that might be taught at a local community college or university. There are tons of virtual webinars out there, whether it's part of an ongoing live summit that an organization is putting on, whether this is just pre-recorded content that's available usually for a small price online. There are a ton of virtual events, webinars out there that you can go and take a course. And what I strongly urge is that you take a course that in the end gives you some sort of a certification, some sort of a license, or some sort of validation, some sort of proof that you've taken the course, and potentially gives you a certification in whatever it is that you've, right? So if you're taking a class on financial statements 101, financial statements for dummies or whatever, right? Financial statements for lawyers is what I took back when I was a practicing lawyer. In the end, after it's a week-long course, right? For just a couple of hours for each session. And in the end, you'll get a certification. Right? So there are those sorts of certifications, those sorts of licensures available in all sorts of different substantive areas. And if you pay just the smallest fee, you'll be able to take a course, you'll actually be able to learn the content, and then you'll be able to have a certification that you can put on your resume. That is, again, the most important thing, to show that you're certified in whatever area it is you took the course in. Take as many of those as possible. And it's really nice to see a proliferation of some of these courses now, even from the top Ivy League universities. You can actually take these mini certified courses. So go investigate those. One way to very quickly learn an area, to force yourself to engage in the discipline it takes to learn an area, soup to nuts, is to volunteer to write an article for a publication, usually an online publication these days, or to volunteer to speak at an event, right? The quickest way to become an expert on an area is to really put yourself on the line like that, because then it forces you to really drill down, do research on the area, and you will learn it much better than any of the audience members. And you'll actually learn from some of the audience members' questions that they ask you, which hopefully you'll be prepared for, but you'll start to understand all of the nuances and all of the different angles to this particular area. So just volunteer to go and speak. That'll also give you these public speaking engagement skills that I mentioned earlier. It doesn't even matter. It's a tiny little audience. It's an audience of 3 or 5 people. It's an audience of you have no idea how big, because it's virtual and it's being recorded ahead of time. Or maybe it's live in front of a huge virtual audience. It really doesn't matter. It's all the same. You will be put on the spot, and you will definitely hone your skills, both in terms of the substantive area, but also in terms of the public speaking engagement skills, right? And then you can actually go and ask your boss if you can do mock high stakes presentations. Usually bosses really like this kind of stuff if they've got the time, because it shows them that ultimately you'll be able to help them when they're making high stakes presentations. So ask them if you can, for example, you can kill 2 birds with 1 stone, prepare a mock budget and then present the budget to them as if they are the board of directors that is looking to approve or not approve the budget, right? And so she'll ask you all of the hard-hitting questions. She'll really put you through your paces, so you'll understand what it's like to face a tough audience. You'll understand what it's like to face a tough audience from whom you have to get approval before you can move on to the next step. And you'll get a very good understanding of the sorts of things people care about in that specific area. The final thing, and I've mentioned this before, is join trade organizations in the substantive area that you're interested in learning. So for example, when I decided that I wanted to sit on public company boards mostly for a living, when I retired from being the CEO of American Apparel and True Religion, I joined the National Association of Corporate Directors. That's an association, that's a trade organization. You must be a director in order to belong to the organization. When you go to the events, back when we were all going to events, the only attendees allowed in are members. So it's all public company board members. And so you're surrounded by colleagues and also folks that you might be able to get your next board seat from. And all of the seminars, now virtual webinars, are geared towards making you a better board director, or geared towards showing you how to make yourself more attractive as a candidate for the next opening on a board. So trade organizations are, and they're sometimes expensive, right? And sometimes they really put you through your paces before they allowed you to join the organization. But in the end, that's where you're going to be surrounded by the folks that will are perfect to network with because they're already in the industry that you want to join. And you'll have very specific, very focused, content-driven, these days virtual webinars that will educate you on the substantive side. So those are a few of my tips in terms of how to gain some of these technical or substantive skills that I highly advise everyone have in order to effectively make yourself attractive to transfer careers, right? To make a career transition, whether it's voluntary or involuntary in the future. And in the next episode, I think what I'll be talking about are some of the non-substantive skills that everyone needs to learn, right? Some of the softer factors that everyone needs to establish a base in order to appear as an attractive candidate for a career transition. Or again, as we talked about in the last episode, in order to make a career transition that isn't necessarily voluntary because you've perhaps been laid off or your organization has filed for bankruptcy and shut its doors, but you can still emerge from that with a really successful career transition. So I hope you've enjoyed this episode. Please be sure and drop me a comment. Let me know what you think. Let me know about other things you'd like for me to talk about in the future. Be sure and subscribe to my YouTube channel so you don't miss future episodes. And I'll see you next time from the Office of the CEO.